My son told his grandkids, "Say goodbye to Grandma, she won't be around much longer." I was perfectly healthy. I overheard everything and stayed silent. The next day, I visited my lawyer and changed my will. A week later, my son came running when he found out, but it was too late. What I did left him speechless. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The smell of vanilla and warm sugar filled my kitchen. My hands moved in the familiar rhythm of spreading frosting, a smooth white canvas for the rainbow sprinkles Maya was about to pour. Ben was already licking red icing from his thumb, a serious, concentrated expression on his 6-year-old face. I hummed an old tune, the afternoon sun painting a bright rectangle on the checked tablecloth. This was the purest kind of happiness. "Careful, sweetheart, not too many," I said as Maya tipped the sprinkle jar. "We want to see the frosting, too." "But Grandma, more is better," she declared, and I laughed. The sound felt good in my throat. "Your dad used to say the same thing. He'd eat the sprinkles right from the jar." I glanced at the clock. Marcus was in the living room, supposedly checking work emails. He had been quiet since arriving, his presence a faintly tense hum in the background of our baking afternoon. I dismissed it. He was busy, successful. I was proud. The plastic sprinkle container was nearly empty. "We need more sparkles," I announced. "I have a fresh jar in the pantry. Don't eat all the cookies while I'm gone." I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward the hallway. The pantry was just off the kitchen, around a short corner. As I passed the archway that led to the living room, I heard Marcus's voice. It was low, a forced whisper that carried more than a normal tone would have. I stopped. He wasn't in the living room. He was in the kitchen, just on the other side of the wall, speaking to the children. My intention was to call out, to say I was getting the sprinkles, but the texture of his voice held me still. It was the voice he used for important, unpleasant instructions. "Listen, guys," he was saying. "Just do this for me, okay? Be extra sweet." "We're always sweet, Daddy," Maya's voice piped up. "I know. Just give her a big hug before we leave. Say a proper goodbye." There was a pause. I could picture his face, leaning down to their level, the way his brow would furrow. "Why a proper goodbye?" Ben asked. "We see Grandma next week." Another pause, heavier. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder. My hand went to the wall, fingers pressing against the cool paint. Then Marcus spoke again. The words were clear, deliberate, and coated in a false veneer of sadness. "Just do it, okay? Grandma won't be around much longer, you know." The world did not spin. The floor did not tilt. Instead, everything became very, very quiet. The laughter from moments ago evaporated, leaving a perfect, ringing silence inside my head. I felt my breath stop in my chest. My hand moved from the wall to press flat over my sternum, as if checking for a heartbeat. It was there, steady and strong. "Won't be around much longer." The phrase hung in the air. It was not a statement of geographical move. I was healthy. I took my walks. I tended my garden. He knew this. It was a financial forecast, a cold, calculating assessment of my utility and its impending conclusion. He was preparing them for my absence, and in doing so, he was revealing his expectation of it. Soon. I remembered then the comments from recent months, dropped into conversations like careless stones. "You should travel, Mom. Enjoy things while you can. This house is a lot for you to manage. Have you thought about a nice retirement community?" I had heard concern. Now I heard a timeline. Raw physical pain flashed behind my ribs, so sharp it was almost nausea. It was the pain of a door slamming shut, a bond severing. This was my son, my only child. I raised him in this house. I worked overtime to buy the shoes he wanted, stayed up late helping with projects, celebrated his successes as my own. The love I had for him was a fundamental fact, like gravity. And he was in my kitchen, telling my grandchildren to say goodbye because I would not be around much longer. The pain receded, replaced by a spreading coldness. It started in my stomach and moved outward to my limbs, a glacial calm. I looked down at my hand, the one over my heart. I saw the faint age spots, the strong veins, a capable hand. It did not shake. I heard the scrape of a chair. He was moving. There was no time to think, only to act, to decide who I would be in the next second. The hurt woman stumbling in to confront him, or something else. I chose something else. I walked the last few steps to the pantry, my movements deliberate and silent. I opened the door. The jar of sprinkles was on the shelf. I picked it up. The glass was cool and smooth. I stood there for a count of 5, breathing in the scent of shelf paper and dry goods. I rebuilt my face. I relaxed my shoulders. I summoned the ghost of my earlier smile. Then I walked back into the kitchen. Marcus was by the table, ruffling Ben's hair. He looked up as I entered. His expression was normal, a little distracted. He saw no change in me. He saw his mother holding sprinkles. "Found them," I said, and my voice was perfect. It was my grandma voice, warm and lightly musical. "Who's ready for the grand finale?" "Me," both children shouted, the heavy instruction from their father apparently filed away for later. I sat down. I took a cookie from the rack. I unscrewed the lid of the new sprinkle jar. My hands were steady. I focused on the granular texture of the sugar crystals, the way they caught the light as they fell. "So, did you get your work sorted?" I asked Marcus, not looking up. Oh, mostly. Just some loose ends." "Well, I'm glad you could take a break to come over." I smiled at him. It felt like placing a mask on my face. He smiled back, a casual, effortless gesture. He had no idea. The coldness inside me solidified. The rest of the visit proceeded with a terrifying normalcy. We finished the cookies. We packed some for them to take home. I received my hugs at the door, big, squeezing hugs from Maya and Ben that now felt like a rehearsal. I kissed their heads. I waved as Marcus backed the car out of the driveway. I stood on the porch until the car turned the corner and disappeared. The evening air was soft. My house stood behind me, quiet and waiting. I went inside. I closed the door. I leaned against it. The silence of the house was complete. It was a listening silence. I walked to the kitchen and began to clean. I wiped the flour from the counter. I washed the mixing bowls. I scrubbed the icing from the tablecloth. Each motion was methodical, a physical anchor for my mind. "Won't be around much longer." The words played on a loop. They were no longer a shock. They were data. They were the key piece of evidence that made sense of all the other clues. His impatient sighs when I talked about my gardening plans for next spring. His pointed questions about the value of the rental property. His subtle discouragement when I mentioned updating my will years ago, saying it was morbid. He was not planning for my future. He was planning for my end. And he saw it as a logistical event, the transfer of assets, the clearing of a space. He did not see me. I put the last bowl in the drying rack. I looked at my hands in the water. They were capable hands. They had built a life. They had held my son as a baby. They had planted roses that still bloomed. They had signed paychecks and mortgage papers. I dried my hands on a towel. The cold resolve that had taken root in my chest was now a fully formed architecture. It was clear, hard, and quiet. He thought I wouldn't be around much longer. He was wrong. But I would make sure his understanding of my presence and its consequences would change forever. The game he did not know he was playing had just begun, and I would write the rules. I hung the damp dish towel on its hook. The kitchen was restored to order, every surface wiped clean. The only evidence of the afternoon was a faint, sweet scent in the air and the container of leftover sprinkles on the counter. I picked it up and placed it in the cabinet. The click of the cabinet door closing was a definitive sound. I moved through the quiet house. The living room was dim, the last of the sunset casting long shadows across the rug. I did not turn on the lights. I sat in my armchair, the one by the window where I read in the mornings. The house settled around me, a familiar series of creaks and sighs. I listened to the silence. It was different now. It was no longer peaceful, it was analytical. "Won't be around much longer." I allowed the words to sit in the center of my mind. I did not push them away with denial or soften them with excuses. I examined them, as a doctor might examine an X-ray, looking for the precise shape of the problem. My first instinct, the maternal reflex, was to rationalize. Marcus was stressed. The pressures of his job, his mortgage, raising 2 children. Perhaps he was worried about me in a clumsy, backward way. He had always been pragmatic, sometimes to a fault. Maybe this was his awkward method of preparing the children for a natural eventuality, far in the future. I tested this theory against the evidence. I recalled his visit 2 weeks prior. He had brought over a brochure for a full-care senior living community. He'd said a friend's mother loved it there. I had thanked him, placed it on the stack of mail, and forgotten about it. At the time, I saw misplaced concern. Now I saw a prospector scouting land. Last month over dinner, he had asked, "You're still driving that old boat, Mom?" He referred to my vintage Cadillac, a car I had restored with my father decades ago. "It's not safe. The value on those is peaking, you know. It might be a good time to sell." I had laughed it off, said the car was part of the family. He had let it drop, but his expression had been one of frustration, not amusement. The pieces connected, forming a clear and ugly picture. The comments were not random. They were strategic. They were steps in a plan. My son was conducting a quiet audit of my life, assessing the value of my assets, and anticipating their transfer. My continued good health was an inconvenience to his timeline. A cold anger, sharp and clean, replaced the last traces of hurt. Anger was useless if it was only a feeling. It had to become fuel. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf in the corner. Between a photo album and a dictionary was a plain, dark blue folder. I pulled it out. I sat back down and opened it on my lap. Inside were documents. The deed to my house, paid in full 15 years ago. The title for the Cadillac. The property tax statements for the small duplex I owned across town, the one that provided a steady, modest income. Bank statements. These were not just papers. They were the physical proof of a lifetime of work. They represented the late shifts at the hospital, the careful budgeting, the sacrifices made to build security for myself and for him. I had built this legacy with the unspoken assumption that it would, one day, be his. It was the final act of motherhood, the last thing I could provide. I had never said it aloud, but I had believed it was a mutual understanding. A sacred trust. He had broken that trust. He had not waited for the natural conclusion of my life. He had begun counting the days until it. He saw my legacy not as a gift to be received with gratitude, but as an entitlement to be claimed with impatience. I closed the folder. The decision crystallized, not as a heated reaction, but as a logical conclusion. If my assets were the source of his anticipation, then they were the point of leverage. If my existence was being measured in terms of its conclusion, then I would redefine the terms of that conclusion. I would not be a victim waiting in her home. I would be the architect of my own legacy. I went to the small desk in the hallway, the one I used for paying bills. I took out a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. At the top, I wrote, "Questions for a lawyer." I began to list them, my handwriting steady. 1. How do I change my will without notifying Marcus beforehand? 2. Can I place my house in a trust for my grandchildren's education? 3. What are the legal mechanisms to leave a nominal sum to an heir, to prevent a contest? 4. How do I designate the rental income to a charitable cause? The act of writing was calming. It channeled the cold energy into a productive path. This was not about revenge in a petty sense. It was about correction. It was about aligning reality with principle. He had acted as if my life was a countdown to his gain. I would act to ensure my life's work served a purpose that honored its value. I finished the list. I looked at it. It was a plan of action, simple and direct. The law was a system of rules. I would use those rules to protect what was mine and to redirect it according to my own values, not his expectations. The phone rang, startling the deep silence. I looked at the caller ID. It was Marcus. I watched his name flash on the screen. The ringtone was the same one I had heard for years. It now sounded like an alarm. I let it ring 3 times. I took a breath, settling my features into a neutral mask. I answered. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hey, Mom, just checking in. The kids are crashed out sugar coma." His voice was light, normal. "That's the sign of a good baking day," I said, matching his tone. "Yeah, listen, thanks for having us. It means a lot." There was a pause. "And you know, we're always here for you, for anything you need, thinking about the future and all." The words were meant to sound supportive. I heard the subtext, the gentle nudge. I saw the blueprint of his strategy. I know you are, Marcus. Thank you. Don't worry about me. My future is very clear to me. I kept my voice warm, almost placid. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, get some rest. Love you. Love you too. I ended the call. I placed the phone back on the desk. The words love you had felt like ash in my mouth, a rote phrase emptied of meaning. But they were necessary. They were part of the performance now. I looked back at my list of questions. The path ahead was clear. Tomorrow I would begin. I would find a lawyer. Not the old family friend who had done my simple will years ago. A new one. A sharp one. Someone who would listen to a clear-eyed woman in her 60s and not patronize her. I stood and walked to the window. My reflection looked back at me from the dark glass. A woman with silver hair, standing straight in a quiet room. The eyes that looked back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a person who had just finished an assessment and was ready to execute a decision. The weight of his words had been crushing, but I had chosen not to be crushed. I had chosen to use that weight as a foundation, something solid to build upon. The stillness in the house was no longer emptiness. It was the quiet before a necessary storm. I went to bed that night not with sadness, but with a focus I had not felt in years. My mind was a closed circuit, planning, calculating, preparing. The grief was locked away in a separate room. For now, I needed the cold, clear space of strategy. The following morning, I dressed with care. I chose a navy blue pantsuit, a garment I reserved for formal occasions. I checked my appearance in the mirror. I looked composed, respectable, and purposeful. I was not a grieving mother coming for sympathy. I was a client coming for a service. I placed the blue folder and my list of questions into a structured leather portfolio. I drove myself downtown in the Cadillac. The car ran smoothly, its engine a quiet hum of reliability. I parked in a garage and walked to the address I had selected after online research. Chen and Associates, Estate Planning. The office was on the 8th floor of a building with a marble lobby. The reception area was quiet, decorated in neutral tones. A young woman at the desk looked up. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, Alina James for Mrs. Chen." "Please have a seat. She'll be with you shortly." I sat on a firm, modern sofa. I did not fidget. I looked at the art on the wall, abstract shapes in cool colors. I focused on my breathing, keeping it even. This was a transaction. I needed to be clear. A door opened. A woman emerged. She was around my age, with sharp, intelligent eyes and dark hair swept into a neat twist. She wore a tailored dress and a simple string of pearls. She extended her hand. "Mrs. James, I'm Gloria Chen. Please come in." Her handshake was firm and brief. Her office was orderly. A large desk held a computer, neat stacks of paper, and a single framed photograph of two teenagers. The wall behind her was lined with law books. She gestured to a chair facing the desk, and she took her own seat. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I began. "It was no trouble. My receptionist mentioned you were seeking counsel on estate matters." She folded her hands on the desk. "How can I help you?" I opened my portfolio. I took out the blue folder and placed it between us. I kept my list in my hand. "I need to change my will. Completely. And I need to do it in a way that is legally sound and difficult to contest." Gloria Chen nodded, her expression neutral and attentive. "That is a common request. Do you have a current will?" "A very old one. It leaves everything to my son, Marcus James. That is no longer my wish." "I see. Has there been a change in your relationship?" "Yes," I met her gaze. "I overheard him telling my grandchildren to say a proper goodbye to me because, and I quote, 'Grandma won't be around much longer.' I am in excellent health. He was not speaking of a trip." A flicker of understanding passed behind her eyes. It was not pity. It was recognition. She gave a single, slow nod. "That is a specific and actionable form of undue expectation. It indicates he is anticipating your demise for financial gain. You are wise to reconsider your plans." Her phrasing was perfect. It was legal, dispassionate, and validating. I felt the first sense of solid ground. "My goal is not revenge," I said, though the word hung in the air. "My goal is justice and peace of mind. I want my assets to serve a purpose that aligns with my values, not his sense of entitlement. And I want to ensure he cannot undo my wishes after I am gone. Those are clear and achievable objectives, she said. She opened the blue folder, glancing at the top documents. Let's discuss what you have, then we can discuss your wishes. For the next 20 minutes, we went through the inventory. The house, mortgage-free, my savings and investment accounts, the duplex rental property, the 1973 Cadillac Eldorado. I provided approximate values. She took notes on a legal pad. You have built a significant legacy, Mrs. James. It was work. Now I want it to work for something good. I referred to my list. My primary concern is my grandchildren, Maya and Ben. They are 8 and 6. Their father's actions are not their fault. I want them provided for, but not through their father's control. We can establish a testamentary trust, she said. The assets you designate, say, the house and the savings, would be held in trust. The principal could be designated for their education, with distributions for tuition, housing, books. They would gain direct access to any remaining funds at a specified age, like 25. The trustee, which could be a bank or a trusted third party, manages the assets until then. Your son would have no legal authority over the trust. That is exactly what I want, I said. The concept was a relief. It protected the children and bypassed Marcus completely. And for the rental property, the income from it currently supports me comfortably. After I am gone, I want the income to go to the Jefferson Street Community Garden. I volunteer there. It's a nonprofit. The income could fund their youth programs, tool maintenance, water bills, a sustained contribution. Gloria made another note. That can be arranged through a directed bequest. The property itself would be deeded to the organization, with the stipulation that the net rental income supports the garden. They could also sell it and use the endowment, but the income stream is often more beneficial. Good. Now the matter of your son. She looked up. To prevent a contest on grounds of oversight or incapacity, it is standard to leave a nominal sum. $1 is typical. It demonstrates he was considered and not accidentally omitted. It strengthens the document. I had read about this. Hearing it from her made it feel real and strategically correct. $1, I repeated. Yes. And the vehicle. It has sentimental value, you said. It does. I would like it offered to the Historical Automobile Society. If they do not want it, it can be sold, and the proceeds added to the grandchildren's trust. Gloria Chen put down her pen. She looked at me, a new level of respect in her demeanor. Mrs. James, your instructions are remarkably clear. This is a solid, legally defensible estate plan. It redirects your legacy according to your principles. My job is to draft the documents to execute your wishes precisely. How long will it take? A first draft by the end of the week. We will review it together. Once you are satisfied, we will sign with 2 disinterested witnesses and a notary. The will becomes effective upon your signature. Copies will be stored here in our vault, and you will receive an executed original. And he will not be notified. Not by me or the law. The only time he would be notified is upon your death, when the executor, whom you will name, presents the will to the probate court. He will learn the terms then. Or, if you choose to inform him beforehand, that is your prerogative. I have no such plan, I said. Understood. She gathered the papers back into the folder and handed it to me. You are taking a powerful step, Mrs. James. It requires courage. It requires logic, I corrected her gently. He made a calculation based on greed. I am making a new calculation based on justice. The courage was in deciding to do it. Now it is just paperwork. A small, approving smile touched her lips. Then let us get the paperwork in order. I'll be in touch by Friday. I stood and she walked me to the door. The meeting had lasted 45 minutes. I felt no exhaustion, only a clarified sense of direction. The cold resolve had found its conduit. The law was the tool, Gloria Chen was the expert craftsman, and I was the architect. As I rode the elevator down, I felt the weight of inaction lift. The plan was no longer a thought in my quiet house. It was a process in motion. I had taken the first concrete step to reclaim what was mine. The right to define my own legacy, on my own terms, until my very last day. True to her word, Gloria Chen's assistant called on Friday morning. The documents were ready for my review. I drove back downtown, the same route now feeling familiar. The leather portfolio sat on the passenger seat, containing my life's inventory. Gloria welcomed me back. This time, we sat at a small conference table in her office. A thick stack of paper, bound with a black clip, lay before her. She handed me a copy. "This is the draft of your last will and testament and the associated pour-over trust agreement," she said. "Take your time. Read every line. My job is to ensure it says exactly what you want it to say." I began to read. The language was formal, dense with legal terms. I focused on the substantive clauses. I saw my name, Eleanor James, defined as the testator. I saw the appointment of an executor, a corporate fiduciary service Gloria recommended for neutrality. I saw the revocation of all prior wills. Then Article 3, specific bequests. "I give and bequeath the sum of $1, to my son, Marcus James." The sentence stood alone on the page. The type was no different from the rest, but it held a finality that was both stark and satisfying. It was a statement of disinheritance, framed in the coldest, most legal terms. It was not an emotional slash. It was a surgical incision. I looked up at Gloria. "This is correct." She nodded. "It's clear, it's deliberate." I continued reading. The next section dealt with the residue of my estate, everything not specifically mentioned. It directed that my primary residence and the entirety of my financial accounts be transferred to a trust, named the James Grandchildren's Educational Trust *. The trust document was attached. I read its terms. The trustee, a bank as we had discussed, would manage the assets. Distributions were permitted for the health, maintenance, and education of Maya and Ben James. Full distribution of the remaining principal would occur to each beneficiary upon attaining the age of 25. If they did not survive, the assets would pass to the community garden. Marcus was not named as a trustee, a beneficiary of the trust, or a successor. He was excluded from the structure entirely. "The trust is airtight," Gloria said, observing my progress. "It provides for their future while insulating the assets from any claims against your son, including potential creditors or a divorce. The money is for them, period." Next was the provision for the duplex. The document devised the property and fee simple to the Jefferson Street Community Garden Project, Inc., with the instruction that the net rental income be used to support its operations and youth programs in perpetuity. Finally, there was a clause for my car. It was bequeathed to the State Historical Automobile Society with the request they preserve or display it. If they declined, it was to be sold and the proceeds poured into the Grandchildren's Trust. I finished reading the last page. I placed the draft on the table. The silence in the room was profound. These papers represented the redirection of everything I had built. They were the legal manifestation of my decision. "It is exactly what I wanted," I said. My voice was steady. "Are there any changes? Any questions?" "No, it's perfect." "Then we can proceed to execution. I have arranged for 2 paralegals from the firm to act as witnesses. They are disinterested parties. I will act as the notary." She left the room and returned moments later with 2 young women. They were professional, introducing themselves briefly. They understood their role. Gloria placed the final, original document in front of me. It was identical to the draft. She pointed to a series of flagged tabs. "You will sign here, here, and initial here. Then our witnesses will sign, and I will notarize." I took the pen she offered. It was a heavy, smooth fountain pen. I felt its weight in my hand. I looked at the line waiting for my signature. This was the point of no return. Once I signed, the old understanding, the unspoken promise that my son would inherit my world, would be legally erased. In its place would be this new, deliberate architecture. I thought of the kitchen, the smell of cookies, the whispered words. I thought of the cold resolve that had filled me that night. That resolve was now a stack of paper. Signing was the final step of that initial decision. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of reclamation. I placed the pen tip on the paper. I signed my name, Eleanor James Asterisk. The ink flowed dark and definite. I moved to the next tab and signed again. I initialed where required. Each mark was a deliberate, calm stroke. I slid the document to the first witness. She signed her name and wrote her address. The second witness did the same. Gloria then placed her notary seal on the document, embossing the paper with a crisp press. She signed and dated the notarization. It was done. Gloria gathered the pages. I will have this scanned for our records. The original will be placed in our fireproof vault. You will receive a certified copy in the mail next week. I would advise you to keep it in a secure place, but not in your home safe. A safe deposit box is best. I will arrange that, I said. The witnesses left quietly. Gloria remained, looking at me. This was a significant action, Mrs. James. How do you feel? I considered the question. I searched for the tumult of emotion, the guilt, the sorrow, the triumph. I found none of those things in their pure form. What I found was a profound and quiet relief. The secret I had carried since that afternoon in the kitchen was now a matter of legal record. The burden of inaction was gone. I had protected the children. I had honored my work. I had answered his calculation with a superior one. I feel clear, I said. I feel like I have just settled a long-standing debt, not to him, to myself. Gloria Chen's professional composure softened into something akin to admiration. You have handled this with remarkable clarity. Many clients in your situation are driven by emotion. You were driven by principle. It makes the document stronger. Thank you for your professionalism, Gloria. You treated me like a rational person. That was important. It was my pleasure. She stood, and I stood with her. We shook hands again. The process is complete. Your wishes are now legally binding. You have control. I left the office building and stepped into the afternoon sunlight. The certified copy would come later, but the act was finished. I drove home, the familiar streets passing by. I felt no urge to look over my shoulder, no pang of doubt. The law was now my ally. It was a system of rules, and I had worked within them perfectly. When I entered my house, the silence welcomed me again. But it was a different silence now. It was not the quiet of suspense, but the quiet of resolution. I had changed the course of the future with a pen. Marcus was still living his life, unaware that the inheritance he was so casually anticipating had just been meticulously, irrevocably, and legally redirected. The game was still in play, but I had just written the final rule. All that remained was for him to discover it. My part for now was complete. I made a cup of tea and sat in my armchair, not planning, not worrying, simply being. The house was still mine. The future was still mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace that was deep and unshakable. The peace of the signed will lasted 3 days. It was a quiet, solid feeling, like a door had been locked against a storm. I went about my routine gardening, volunteering at the community garden, reading. I did not think of Marcus constantly. The matter was settled, but I knew he would come. His pattern of visits had increased in recent months, and I expected it to continue. On Wednesday afternoon, his car pulled into the driveway. I saw it from the kitchen window. I took a slow breath, centering myself. I was an actress stepping onto a familiar stage. The script was unspoken, but I knew my lines. I opened the front door before he could knock. Marcus, what a nice surprise. My smile was the same as always. Hey, Mom, just finished up a client meeting nearby. Thought I'd pop in. He leaned in for a brief, obligatory hug. He carried the scent of his cologne and office air. Come in, I just put the kettle on. He followed me to the kitchen, his eyes doing a casual sweep of the room. I saw him note the fresh flowers on the table, the clean counters, the general state of upkeep. He was assessing, always assessing. Place looks good, he said, taking a seat at the table. It's home, I said simply. I took down 2 mugs, the one he'd made in elementary school and my plain white one. Earl Grey. Sure, thanks. I prepared the tea, my movements measured. The silence was not comfortable, but I did not rush to fill it. I placed his mug in front of him, the chipped handle facing right, the way he preferred. So how are things? I asked, sitting across from him. Busy, the market's volatile, makes clients nervous. He blew on his tea. But we're managing. The kids are good. Chloe's thinking of going back to work part-time. That's wonderful for her, I said, genuinely pleased for my daughter-in-law. She's so talented. Yeah, it would help with the cash flow. Private school tuition isn't getting any cheaper. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of the mug. How about you? You seem well. I am well. The garden is thriving. I'm trying a new hybrid tomato this year. That's great, Mom, really? He paused. The pause was deliberate. It's good to see you so active, independent. A lot of people your age, well, they start to need more help. It's a burden on the family. And there it was, the first probe. I'm sure it can be, I agreed, my tone neutral. But I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I don't plan to stop. Of course not, but you have to think ahead, be practical. He leaned forward slightly. Have you given any more thought to what we talked about? Getting your affairs in order? I met with a great financial planner recently. He does a lot of work with seniors on legacy planning. My affairs are in order, Marcus. I took a sip of my own tea. It was perfectly steeped. Are they, though? His voice took on a patient, explanatory tone, the one he used when he thought I was being obtuse. I mean, that old will you have? It's not reflective of current realities. Tax laws have changed, and it doesn't account for how things are now. How are things now? I asked, looking directly at him. He shifted in his seat. You're older, I'm established. The kids are in the picture. A simple everything to Marcus document it's simplistic. It could create complications. We should structure things to avoid probate, minimize taxes, protect the assets for the next generation. He said protect the assets, but I heard secure my inheritance. He was so transparent it was almost pathetic. I appreciate your concern, I said, layering my voice with a faint, dismissive warmth. But really, it's all handled. I've taken care of it. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. Taken care of how? Did you talk to someone? I've seen to it. That's all you need to know. A mother is allowed some privacy, isn't she? I gave a light, almost girlish laugh, a sound that felt alien coming from me now. It disarmed him. I just want to help, Mom. I don't want you getting bad advice. There are people who prey on the elderly. The word elderly hung in the air between us. I let it sit. I looked at him, my expression one of benign incomprehension. I'm quite capable of spotting a predator, dear. I raised one after all. He froze for a second, his cup halfway to his mouth. Then he chuckled, deciding it was a joke. Very funny. I'm glad you think so. I stood up. More tea. No, I'm good. He was thrown off his script. He scanned my face, looking for signs of defiance or understanding. He saw only his mother, smiling softly, offering more tea. Well, just keep it in mind, he said, regrouping. I could set up a meeting with my guy, no obligation. I'll think about it, I said, a non-committal phrase that could mean anything. I began to wash the mugs at the sink, turning my back to him. It was a calculated move. It showed a lack of engagement, a dismissal of his topic as unimportant. I heard his chair scrape back. I should get going, beat the traffic. I dried my hands and walked him to the door. It was good to see you, son. Give my love to Chloe and the kids. He hugged me again. This time it felt even more perfunctory. Take care of yourself, okay? Seriously. I always do. I stood in the doorway and waved as he drove away. The smile stayed on my face until his car turned the corner. Then I let it fall. My cheeks felt stiff. I closed the door and locked it. The performance was over. I walked back to the kitchen. His mug was on the draining board. I picked it up. The childish clay artifact, glazed in lumpy blue, I had kept it for decades. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I placed it back in the cabinet. It was just a mug now. The visit had confirmed everything. His greed was not a momentary lapse. It was a sustained campaign. He was not just anticipating my death, he was trying to manage its financial logistics. His solicitude was a tool. His concern was a tactic. But he had learned nothing. He had detected no change in me. He saw only what he expected to see, a possibly stubborn, aging mother who needed gentle guidance toward the inevitable. His arrogance was his blindness. I felt no anger now. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. The documents in Gloria Chen's vault were my silent allies. Every word he had just spoken, every hint and probe, only validated my decision. He was digging a hole for himself, and with every visit, he tossed another shovelful of dirt over his own shoulder, oblivious to the depth. The game was indeed still in play, but he was the only one moving pieces on the board. My move was already complete. All that was left was to wait for him to discover his king was gone. I had the strange, calm sensation of watching a scene unfold from a great height, knowing how it would end detached from the turmoil below. I finished cleaning the kitchen. Then I went outside to check on my tomato plants. The sun was warm on my back. The earth in my hands was real and present. This was my life. He could keep his future plans. I was living in the now, and the now was finally, blessedly, mine. I learned the details of that afternoon later, pieced together from his own furious account and the deductions I could make. While I was mulching the tomato beds, feeling the sun and the solid satisfaction of my decisions, the process I had set in motion reached its next phase. A certified letter, requiring a signature, arrived at Marcus's house. It came from the law offices of Chen and Associates. He told me he saw the return address and felt a flicker of professional curiosity, then a slight, undefined unease. He signed for it. He took the envelope to his home office, a room decorated with modern furniture and framed certificates of his achievements. He opened it with a silver letter opener, a gift from a client. The first page was a standard cover letter on firm letterhead. It stated, "Pursuant to your status as a named beneficiary in the estate planning documents of Alina James, we are providing you with this notice of filing as a courtesy. Enclosed, please find a copy of the executed last will and testament of Alina James, dated June 12th. He told me his first thought was confusion. A courtesy copy? My old will was a single page from decades ago. This package was thick. He remembered our conversation about my affairs being handled. A cold trickle of apprehension started in his stomach, he said. He spread the pages on his polished desk. He began to read. I can imagine his eyes scanning the formal language, skipping to the substantive parts. He was a financial advisor. He knew how to parse legal documents for key information. His gaze would have snagged on Article 3. I give and bequeath the sum of $1, to my son, Marcus James. He recounted that he read it twice. A laugh, short and disbelieving, escaped him. A mistake, a typo, it had to be. He turned the page, his movements becoming quicker, less controlled. He found the section on the residue. He read about the trust. The James Grandchildren's Educational Trust. He read the terms, the house, the savings, all of it. Locked away for Maya and Ben, managed by a corporate trustee. No role for him, no access. He was not a successor, not a guardian of the assets. He was excluded. The papers rustled in his hands. He told me his palms were damp. He kept reading, looking for a loophole for his name somewhere else. He found the section devising the rental property to the Jefferson Street Community Garden. He found the clause about the Cadillac. He said the room became very quiet. The hum of the computer, the distant sound of his children playing in another room, it all receded. There was only the document in his hands and the numbers adding up in his head. The value of the house, the balance of the investment accounts, the income stream from the duplex, now permanently diverted, all of it gone. He told me he whispered, "No," to the empty room. Then he said it louder. "No." He scrambled for the cover letter again. He read the name of the law firm, Chen and Associates. He did not recognize it. He read the date of the will again. June 12th, just days after his visit, after he had sat at my kitchen table and urged me to see his financial planner, after he had told the children to say goodbye. The connection clicked into place with a physical jolt. He said it felt like a door slamming shut inside his chest. This was not a mistake. It was a response. A calculated, legal, devastating response. I had not been stubborn or confused. I had been acting. While he was hinting about probate, I was in a lawyer's office, methodically dismantling his inheritance. He told me he stood up so quickly his chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf. The pages of the will fluttered. He gripped the edge of the desk. The numbers were not just numbers now. They were his children's private school tuition. They were the second mortgage he had taken out. They were his plan, his future, his expectation. They were his. And they were now legally bequeathed to a trust, a community garden, and a historical society. He was left with a single, symbolic dollar. The insult of it was precise and brutal. He was not forgotten. He was remembered and purposefully dismissed. I learned that he did not call his wife first. He did not call his own lawyer. He acted on pure, unmediated panic and rage. He gathered the papers, crumpling the cover letter in his fist. He stormed out of his office, past his confused wife who called out, "Marcus, what's wrong?" He did not answer fully. He muttered something about me, about a lawyer, about a terrible mistake. He got into his car. He told me he drove to my house, the speedometer needle climbing, his thoughts a chaotic storm of betrayal and fury. He could not see the justice, only the loss. He could not see his own words as the cause, only my actions as a vicious, disproportionate attack. He was coming to confront me. The document, now a physical artifact of his shattered assumptions, lay on the passenger seat. The game he never knew he was playing was over. He was arriving to contest the result, but the rules had been set, and the judge was me. All I had to do was wait for the knock on my door. The peace of my garden was about to be broken, but I was ready. The law was on my side, and for the first time, so was the absolute clarity of my own conscience. The knock on my door was not a knock. It was a series of hard, percussive blows that shook the frame. I was in the living room, reading. I placed a bookmark between the pages, closed the book, and set it on the side table. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my sweater. I walked to the door. I opened it. Marcus stood on the porch, his face flushed, his breathing ragged. In his right hand, he clutched the sheaf of papers, now bent and crumpled. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated with fury. "Mom," the word was an accusation. "Marcus, this is unexpected." I did not step aside. He pushed past me into the house, his shoulder brushing against me. He marched into the living room, then turned to face me as I closed the door and followed him. "What is this?" He thrust the papers toward me. They trembled in his grip. "What in God's name is this?" I did not reach for them. I looked at them, then at his face. "It appears to be legal documents. Would you like to sit down?" "Sit down? No, I don't want to sit down. I want an explanation." His voice climbed. "You went behind my back. You hired some lawyer. You changed everything." "I updated my will, yes. It was my right to do so." My voice was calm, level. I remained standing near the archway, creating distance between us. "Updated? You didn't update it. You nuked it. You gave away my inheritance." Spittle flew from his lips. $1. You left me $1. Are you insane? Have you lost your mind?" "I am perfectly sound, Marcus. The will was witnessed and notarized. My mental capacity is not in question." "Then it's malice, pure, simple malice." He waved the will like a flag. "You gave my house to a trust, my kids' house. You gave my income property to a damn garden club. What did I do? What did I possibly do to deserve this?" He was genuinely bewildered. The depth of his entitlement was such that he could not connect his actions to this consequence. He saw only a monstrous, unprovoked attack. "You did nothing," I said, my tone still even. "That is the point." "What does that mean? Is this because I suggested you see a financial planner? Because I was concerned about your future? Is that my crime?" He was packing now, a caged animal. "Someone got to you, that lawyer. She filled your head with nonsense. We can fix this. We'll get it declared invalid. Undue influence. I'll get my own attorney." "Stop!" The word was not loud, but it was sharp. It cut through his rant. He halted, staring at me. I took a single step forward. I kept my hands at my sides. "No one influenced me. Gloria Chen listened to my instructions and executed them. The decisions were mine, every one of them." "But why?" he shouted, the question torn from him. "Why would you do this to me, to your own son?" The moment had arrived. The secret I had carried for weeks, the cold seed from which all this had grown, was now ripe. The air in the room felt charged, waiting. I looked directly into his eyes. I did not blink. I spoke slowly, ensuring each word landed with its full weight. I heard you, Marcus. He blinked. What? In my kitchen, 3 weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon, the children and I were baking cookies. I went to the pantry for more sprinkles. I paused, watching his face. A faint line of confusion appeared between his brows. You were in the kitchen with Maya and Ben. You thought I was out of earshot. You were whispering. I saw the first flicker of recognition. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his mouth. His gaze shifted from my eyes to a point over my shoulder, accessing the memory. You told them to give me a proper goodbye. You said. I recited the words with precise, uninflected clarity. You said, Grandma won't be around much longer, you know. The color drained from his face. The furious red receded, leaving a pale, waxy hue. His grip on the will loosened. The pages rustled. He said nothing. I am in excellent health, I continued, the same calm, explanatory tone. You were not referring to a trip. You were preparing them for my death. You were anticipating it. You were measuring my life in terms of its end for your financial benefit. That was your calculation. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes darted around the room, as if searching for a rebuttal and escape. So I made a calculation of my own, I said. I calculated that a man who would say that to his children about his healthy mother does not value a legacy. He only values an inheritance. I decided my legacy would go to those who value me or to causes I value. You are left $1, so you cannot claim I forgot you. I did not forget you, Marcus. I remembered exactly what you said. The papers slipped from his fingers and scattered on the rug at his feet. He did not look down at them. He looked at me, and for the first time in his adult life, I saw something other than confidence or impatience or condescension in his eyes. I saw shock. I saw the beginning of a horrible, dawning comprehension. The foundation of his world, the assumption of his right to my life's work, had just been vaporized by his own careless words. He took a stumbling step backward and sank into the armchair, the one I usually sat in. He was breathing heavily, not from anger now, but from the impact. The confrontation was over. The storm of his rage had hit the immovable wall of my truth, and it had collapsed. Now came the quiet, terrible aftermath. He sat in my chair, surrounded by the evidence of his loss, and he had nothing left to say. I remained standing, waiting. The next move was his, but all the power was now, undeniably, mine. The silence stretched. It was not the tense silence of before, but a hollow, emptied one. Marcus sat in my chair, his head bowed, looking at his hands. The scattered pages of the will lay around his feet like fallen leaves. I did not rush to fill the quiet. I moved to the sofa and sat, my posture straight, my hands folded in my lap. I waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was a ragged scrape, all the fury gone. You heard that? Yes. He nodded slowly, as if confirming a fact to himself. He still did not look at me. I didn't mean I was just trying to get them to behave, to be respectful. You told them I was dying, Marcus, to secure a respectful goodbye. That is a specific choice of words. You were managing their expectations, and yours. He flinched. A long minute passed. So this, he gestured weakly at the papers, this is my punishment. No, I said, my tone still even. This is the consequence. There is a difference. A punishment is emotional. This is transactional. You treated my life as a financial event. I have simply revised the terms of the transaction. He looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed. You're cutting me out completely. My own children get everything, but through some trust I can't touch. You're treating me like a criminal. I am treating you like a man who cannot be trusted with a legacy. The trust is for Maya and Ben. It is not your money. It never was. It is mine, and soon it will be theirs for their education. You will have no legal right to it. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot mismanage it. It is protected from you. That was the point. And the house, this house, his voice cracked, will be sold upon my death. The proceeds go into the trust. You have your own home, Marcus. But this is my home. He burst out, a last flare of emotion. It is my home, I corrected him gently. You grew up here. That does not make it yours. You assumed it would be. That assumption was your error. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The rental income, we were counting on that, for the kids' school, for our retirement. The duplex will support the community garden. It will fund children's programs. It will do tangible good for people who are not counting the days until I am gone. My money will help things grow. I find that appropriate. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. $1. You left me $1. Yes, it is a legal strategy. It proves you were considered and explicitly excluded. It makes the will much harder to contest on grounds of oversight or undue influence. Gloria Chen advised it. It was a smart, practical decision. I paused. I thought you would appreciate the practicality of it. The barb landed. He winced. He understood then that every part of this was a reflection of his own values. Pragmatism, calculation, cold assessment turned back on him. He had been outmaneuvered in his own language. You can't do this, he whispered, but it was a statement of despair, not defiance. It is already done. The documents are signed, witnessed, and filed. The law is clear. This is my property to dispose of as I see fit. You have no claim until I am dead, and then you will have a claim to $1. That is the new reality. He sat back, looking ancient in the soft light of my living room. The entitled son was gone, replaced by a man staring at the ruins of his own avarice. What am I supposed to tell people? That my mother left me $1. You can tell them the truth, or you can tell them nothing. That is your concern, not mine. Another silence fell. This one was heavier, final. The fight had drained out of him completely, leaving only a stunned acceptance. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw a woman who was not a placeholder, not a soon-to-be-vacated space, but a sovereign entity with a will of her own. The realization was painful for him. I could see it in his face. You must hate me, he said, his voice low. I do not hate you, I said, and it was true. The hot, painful emotions had been burned away in the cold forge of my planning. What remained was a clean, clear distance. I am disappointed, and I have taken steps to protect what is mine from your disappointment. That is all. This is not about emotion. It is about estate planning. You were so interested in mine. Now you know the details. He stood up slowly, as if his body ached. He did not pick up the papers. He left them on the floor. He walked toward the front door, his steps unsteady. I did not get up. At the door, he stopped. He did not turn around. The kids, can they still see you? Of course. My issue is not with them. They are always welcome here, but you will not bring them here to say premature goodbyes. You will not use them. Is that clear? He gave a single, stiff nod. Then he opened the door and walked out. He did not close it gently. I listened to his car start and drive away, the sound fading into the distance. I remained on the sofa for a while. The confrontation was over. The reckoning had happened. I felt no elation, no sorrow. I felt a quiet finality. The words had been said. The lesson, however harsh, had been delivered. He would not forget it. Eventually, I stood. I gathered the scattered pages of the will from the rug. I smoothed them out and stacked them neatly. I placed them in a drawer of my desk. They were just paper now, their power already spent in the telling. The consequences were set in motion. I had reclaimed my life, my legacy, and my peace. The rest was up to him. The week after Marcus left my house, I returned to my routine. The world did not end. The sun rose. The garden needed watering. I felt a profound lightness, as if a heavy, ill-fitting coat I had been wearing for years had finally been removed. I was not waiting for anything anymore. On Thursday morning, I drove to the Jefferson Street Community Garden. The air was warm, carrying the scent of damp earth and growing things. I wore my old canvas hat and work gloves. Several other volunteers were already there, weeding and turning compost. A group of children from the summer program were gathered near the tomato beds, their instructor trying to explain the concept of pollination. I walked to the tool shed and took out a trowel and a flat of young basil plants. I found an empty patch in the herbs section and began to work. The rhythm of digging, placing, patting soil was meditative. My hands knew what to do. "Grandma El, look!" a small voice called. I looked up. It was Miguel, a boy of about 7 who came to the garden every week. He was holding a fat, wriggling earthworm in his palm, his face a picture of triumph. "That's a champion worm, Miguel. Put him right near the roots. He'll help the plants breathe." He nodded solemnly and carefully deposited his prize into the soil. I smiled. This was a legacy, too. Not one documented on paper, but one planted in the earth and in a child's curiosity. I had been working for perhaps an hour when I heard a familiar voice. "I thought I might find you here." I looked up, shading my eyes with a dirt-streaked hand. Gloria Chen stood at the edge of the garden path, wearing a linen blazer and slacks. She looked out of place among the vegetable rows, but her smile was genuine. "Gloria, this is a surprise." I stood, brushing the soil from my knees. "I had a meeting nearby. I wanted to deliver some news in person." She glanced at the children nearby, their laughter filling the air. "It's a beautiful place." "It is. Would you like to walk?" We strolled slowly along the gravel path that wound through the garden plots. I showed her the new rainwater collection system, the bee hotels, the plot where the neighborhood kids grew giant sunflowers. "The reason for my visit," she began, her tone shifting to professional warmth, "is to confirm that all the instruments are fully executed and recorded. The James Grandchildren's Educational Trust is established with the corporate fiduciary. The deed transfer for the duplex to the garden's nonprofit is filed, with the income directive attached. Everything is locked in." "That's excellent news. Thank you." "There's more," she said. "The fiduciary has asked for your guidance on a letter of intent for the grandchildren. It's not a legal document, but it can express your hopes for how the trust funds are used, emphasis on education, perhaps encouragement to pursue a trade or a degree. It can be a personal touch for them to read when they're older." I considered this. "I would like that. I will write something." "Good." She stopped walking and turned to me. "How are you, Alina, truly?" I looked around the garden at the green life stretching toward the sun. "I am at peace. The matter is settled. He knows the truth. There is nothing left to fight over. The energy I was using to contain my anger is now free for other things, like this." I gestured to the basil plants I had just put in the ground. "He hasn't tried to contact you. Legally, I mean." "No, I believe the reality has sunk in. He understands the mechanism is legal and airtight. Contesting it would be expensive and futile. He is a practical man in the end. He will cut his losses." I said this without bitterness. It was a simple analysis. "And your relationship?" "It is suspended. The children came over yesterday, brought by Chloe. It was a little quiet, but it was good. They did not say goodbye. They asked if we could make pizza next time." A real smile touched my lips. "That is the relationship I will nurture, the one with them. With him, time will tell. But the power dynamic has permanently shifted. He sees me now. Not as a mother, not as a resource, but as a person who made a consequential decision. It's a start." Gloria nodded. "You handled an excruciating situation with remarkable strength and intelligence. It was an honor to assist you." "You treated me with respect," I said. "That was the most important part. You listened to a rational woman and helped her execute a rational plan. Not many people would have done that without injecting their own emotions." "It was my job," she said simply. "But it became more than that. It was a lesson in dignity." We had circled back to the main gate. Our business was complete. A child ran past us, chasing a butterfly, his shouts pure joy. "I should let you get back to your planting," Gloria said, extending her hand. This time, the handshake felt like one between equals, between allies. "Thank you for coming, Gloria, for everything." She left, her heels clicking on the pavement. I watched her go, then turned back to my basil plants. I knelt on the padded kneeler, the sun warm on my back. I finished the row, patting the soil firmly around each stem. The legal work was done. The financial future was secured for the causes I chose. The confrontation was over. All that remained was living. The garden, the children, my books, my home, these were my life, not a countdown but a continuation. I stood up, surveyed my work, and felt a deep, unshakable satisfaction. I had reclaimed my narrative. I had rewritten the ending. And now I was simply living in the new story. Another week passed. The basil plants had taken root, their leaves a vibrant green against the dark soil. I was at the garden again, this time showing a group of older children how to build a small trellis for pea vines. We were using bamboo poles and twine, my fingers looping the knots I had learned from my own father. The afternoon was winding down, the heat softening into a gentle warmth. I felt a presence before I saw him, a shift in the light, a stillness at the periphery. I looked up from the trellis, my hand still holding a length of twine. Marcus stood on the other side of the chain-link fence that bordered the garden's north side. He was not dressed for the office. He wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, his hands shoved into his pockets. He was not trying to come in. He was just standing there, watching. The children were focused on their own projects, chattering and tying their clumsy knots. I held Marcus's gaze for a long moment. His expression was unreadable from this distance, but his posture was not aggressive. It was still, almost hesitant. I made a decision. I gave him a single, slow nod. It was not an invitation, it was not a dismissal. It was an acknowledgement. I saw you, I know you are there. He did not nod back. He did not smile. He simply stood, a solitary figure separated from me by the fence and the raised garden beds bursting with life. I turned my attention back to the child next to me, a girl named Leela who was struggling with her knot. "Here, like this," I said, my voice calm and clear. I guided her small hands. "You make a loop, then pull the end through. It's called a clove hitch. It will hold." I helped her tighten it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus still there. He had not moved. He was observing the scene, me, the children, the thriving garden that would soon be sustained by what was once his anticipated income. The reality of my choice was no longer a piece of paper. It was this place, this activity, this future. After a few more minutes, I straightened up and walked toward the water spigot to fill a watering can. I did not look at him again. I moved with purpose, attending to the needs of the plants. When I returned to the trellis project, my glance went briefly to the fence. He was gone. I felt no surge of emotion, no victory, no pity. His appearance was a data point. He was processing. He was seeing the consequences in the light of day, not in the angry shadows of my living room. That was necessary. Whether it led to anything was uncertain, and for the first time, I was truly indifferent to the outcome. The children's parents began to arrive. I helped clean up the tools, waving goodbye as they ran off with their adults. The garden grew quiet, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. I stayed to water the new transplants, the spray from the hose catching the light like a veil of diamonds. My life was my own, every part of it. The house I returned to each night was mine. The money in my bank account was mine to spend. The car in my garage was mine to drive. The love of my grandchildren was mine to enjoy, untainted by hidden agendas. The garden was mine to nurture. The future was a landscape I had designed, and I was walking through it on my own 2 feet. The door to a relationship with Marcus was not locked, but the handle was now on my side. He would have to approach with something other than expectation. He would have to come as a petitioner, not a claimant. And I would decide if, when, and how to open it. That power was the final and most satisfying reclamation. I finished watering, coiled the hose, and collected my hat and gloves. As I walked to the gate, I took one last look at the garden. Rows of potential, tangible growth, a legacy in progress chosen by me. I drove home. The Cadillac's engine purred, a sound I loved. I made a simple dinner. I read a book. I went to bed early. The silence in my house was no longer analytical or waiting. It was peaceful. It was complete. My son had told his kids I wouldn't be around much longer. He was wrong. I was everywhere, in the trust for my grandchildren, in the soil of the community garden, in the quiet strength of my own home. I was more present in the world now than I had been in years, and I intended to stay that way for a very, very long time.